Hello, we're going to talk now and today about the demographic transition model. Now this is fundamental to human geography, fundamental to understanding about the shape and the structure of populations. Now if you're using this as a revision tool, then what I suggest you do is get a piece of paper, sketch out the shapes you can see here, the lines, the demographic transition model, and then you can pause it as I talk through it and add notes on as are appropriate to you. Now, I'm not going to be focusing in this video on the population pyramids that you can see at the bottom of the screen here. Those will take a bit longer, so I can do those at a future moment, but many of you will understand the basis of them anyway. Right, so the demographic transition model. This model helps us to understand how birth rates and death rates will change over time as a country or a particular part of a country gets richer. It's worth noting that countries tend to get richer over time. There are some exceptions to that though, of course. War and epidemics, pandemics, cause possibly countries to move backwards or get stuck in this process. So in a nutshell, as we get richer, we one, live longer, and two, we tend to have fewer babies. Okay, so we'll start on the left, stage one. So here we have no growth or no discernible growth. This is a pre-industrial society. The birth rate and the death rate here are in balance, with there being maybe small fluctuations with wars, crop failures, diseases, that kind of thing. Now the UK experienced this in the late 18th century, and now there aren't really any countries that would fall into stage one, but you might say remote rainforest tribes would be the example we perhaps have from the current time. But that said, globalization and technology transfer, the concept of leapfrogging, where one country one place can borrow technology from somewhere else, means that there is that transfer from rich to poor. And so there are very few examples of a pre-industrial society left in the world. Okay, stage two. Here we have rapid population. You can see the green line and the blue line start to move apart here. At this point we have sanitation, that place will have healthcare, better diet, people start to live a bit longer. The UK went through this in the later 18th century. Now, many textbooks will talk about Afghanistan as being the example that fits into stage two. Spelling Afghanistan is a challenge for some students, in my experience. Try and get that one right. Much of sub-Saharan Africa, though, is perhaps struggling to get beyond stage two, struggling to break into stage three. An interesting one to comment on there might be that Nigeria, by some counts, might be still said to be in stage two, but that in itself is an interesting comment to make, because Nigeria is rapidly developing. It has got a big development gap within the nation, so to stay is a good way to illustrate the fact that saying one entire country is in a particular stage of this model is a bit limited in itself. But you could argue Nigeria. If you want a safe example, Afghanistan. Okay. Now the cause of that, this transition from stage one to stage two is largely going to be education, especially education of women in the society, and that's massively important. The education of women is a really good measure of development and is vital to that the global development process. Educating women in a society means we can break poverty cycles. Women will have a delay in the age when they first get pregnant. It's going to improve women's and their children's survival rate. We get the empowerment of women. We get less female genital mutilation, and it is all in all really important and vital. Okay, so moving into stage three. Here, as you can see, population growth starts to slow down. And this is because the green line starts to fall off, as you can see. This is the green line the green line being the birth rate, starts to fall. And that's going to be linked to contraception, again linked to women's empowerment, which we talked about in stage 2, perhaps linked to children no longer being needed to work. A transition in values could be important here, perhaps away from men measuring their virility by the number of children they have, and a link again away from perhaps having a patriarchal society, a male-dominated society, or a small move away from it at least. So the UK, we would probably talk about late 19th century, possibly early 20th century being in stage 3. A contemporary example, so now India, maybe Jamaica, South Africa, although again South Africa a really interesting case. There's a huge development gap within South Africa, many of you will be aware. That's a divide along racial lines, as you also perhaps know, and you can look up there, and I won't go into it now. You can look up apartheid, which was a racist policy run in the country between 1948 and the early 1990s. Okay, so stage 4, here in stage 4 we've got the green line and the blue line coming back together again, certainly by the end of stage 4, and that's the point at which the total population line starts to level off. So the UK, this would perhaps be now. We are in stage 4, most people would say. The birth rate is at what we would call the replacement rate, which means it's roughly equal to the death rate. So this is perhaps a symptom of wealth and an economically successful society. But it does lead to an aging population, which creates issues in itself. Which takes us into stage 5, where we can perhaps use the examples of Germany, Italy, Japan. They probably moved into stage 5, whereby we have an older population, and older people don't have as many babies. The death rate, because there's an aging population, the death rate starts to rise, and we get this really historically unique situation where, as you can see here, the green line moves above the blue line, which means we get natural population decrease, which is really worrying for those economies, for those nations. And to look at that, we would need to look a bit more about dependency ratios and some of the things you could pick up from studying the population pyramids from the bottom of this screen, where we look at the evolving shape of those and think about the number of workers compared to the number of people who are reliant upon those workers to pay taxes and things and provide healthcare and all those other things. Essentially, enough workers to look after the older people and also the youth who need educating and all these other things. It's worth noting, and there's many other points you could make about issues with this model. One of the main ones to consider would be that the demographic transition model doesn't account for migration from nation to nation. So of course, if you find yourself as a country not having enough young workers to do the jobs, well, what you might do is try and encourage workers to move in, for example. Thank you very much.